Melchizedek was the priest before the Levitical priesthood. Actually, he was several generations. We have Abraham, who returned tithes to Melchizedek. Then we had Isaac. Then we had Jacob. Then we had Levi. So if you're going to go to the highest authority, would you go to the Levitical priesthood or would you go to the Melchizedek priesthood? The priesthood, Hebrews 5, 5 and 6. I want to look at that because we need to see that. We need to see this one really clearly. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 5 and 6. So also Christ, the Messiah, did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him. So it wasn't Yeshua's choice to be high priest. He was put in as the high priest because he was the only one qualified to get the job done, i.e., cleanse us from all sin. I'm not talking about justification here. I'm talking about sanctification, because once we get into the Day of Atonement, which is where the high priest was, we have to become sanctified. We have to be completely set apart for God's purposes if we're going to get through the judgment, which is the Day of Atonement. It says, as he also says, let's back up. So also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, the Father said to him, "You are my son, today I've begotten you." And he also says in another place, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." So evidently Yeshua is a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Now let's go to chapter 7, 11 through 17. And we want to go through this because this is quite important. 11 through 17. Therefore, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest that another priest should arise according to the order of Melchizedek and not according to the order of Aaron? Let's understand this. So, if perfection, that's complete sanctification, that's holiness to God, that's a life without sin. If that could have been accomplished through the Levitical priesthood, there wouldn't have been a need for another priesthood. But that priesthood could never get people sanctified, completely separated from sin. It was to point forward to the one that could completely sanctify. This is what we need to understand. So the going back to this priesthood would be completely going backwards in time, trying to restore something that was not going to work. Why would you bring back something that was never intended to work, to do the job that it pointed forward to? It makes no sense whatsoever. What further need was there for another priest should arise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be called according to the order of Aaron? For the priesthood being changed? Wow. For the priesthood being changed of necessity. Why was it necessary for the priesthood to be changed? That's what I'm talking about. The priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, could not do the things that it pointed forward to because it was incapable, because it was led, it was ministered by sinful human beings. We can't rise above those that we're looking to. We need to look to Yeshua as our high priest, and he is the one that does the perfecting because he starts to live out his life in us. That's how we become perfected. For the priesthood being changed, of a necessity, there is also a change in the law. Well, what do you mean? I thought the law was forever. The things in the law that pointed forward to something were changed because what they pointed forward to has manifested itself. Therefore, there was a change or a transformation transforming us to the heavenly priesthood and not the earthly priesthood. For he of whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe. This is how it was changed, from which no man has officiated at the altar. You couldn't be a priest unless you were of the Levitical line. But now the priesthood has changed, and we know this for a fact because it tells us, for it is evident that our Lord arose from Judah, of which tribe Moses spoke nothing concerning a priesthood. Let me get this straight. So if I'm totally relying on Moses, I'm not going to get it. Did you get that? Don't make Moses your final authority. Very interesting. You can't do it. This is what the writer of Hebrews is saying here. For it is evident that our Lord arose from Judah, of which tribe Moses spoke nothing. Why? Because he never saw it. And it is yet far more evident if, in the likeness of Melchizedek, there arises another priest who has come, not according to the law of the fleshly commandment, according to the law of Moses, but according to the power of an endless life. You see, Melchizedek was the priest before the Levitical priesthood. Actually, he was several generations. We have Abraham, who returned tithes to Melchizedek. Then we had Isaac. Then we had Jacob. Then we had Levi. So if you're going to go to the highest authority, would you go to the Levitical priesthood or would you go to the Melchizedek priesthood? You see, we're reverting back to the original priesthood. Why would we revert back to the Levitical priesthood? We can't. We mustn't. We need to focus on the Melchizedek priesthood because it tells us, because it's a priesthood that is endless. He's a priest after the order of Melchizedek forever. Here it says this again, the power of an endless life. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Verse 18, chapter 7. For on the one hand, there is an annulling of the former commandment because of its weakness and unprofitableness. So because it was based on humanity, sinful humanity, it didn't have the power, and so it was done away with because it was weak. It could not produce the fruit that God wanted it to produce. He never intended it to produce the fruit of a perfect life. He knew that it could never do that. It was always in his plan to replace it with Yeshua, the Messiah. For the law made nothing perfect. On the other hand, there is the bringing in of a better hope, through which we draw near to God. Inasmuch as he was not made a priest without an oath, for they have become priests without an oath, but he with an oath by him who said to him, Jehovah has sworn and will not relent. That means turn back on it. So he says he will not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. By so much more, Yeshua has become surety for a better covenant or better guarantee. And there were many priests because they were prevented by death from continuing, but he, because he continues forever, has a what? Unchangeable priesthood. Friends, we are not going back to the Levitical priesthood. It is gone. It has been buried. It has fulfilled the purpose God had for it through disappointment. He wanted them to accept Yeshua. You can read about that in Malachi chapter 3. That shows that Malachi chapter 3, you want to study that chapter. It's got some really neat information because it talks about John the Baptist and the Messiah coming to his temple to purify the sons of Levi, but they rejected him. You see, God's plan was that everyone accept him. He's not willing that any perish. And I would conclude from that, that would even be the sons of Levi and the ministers in the temple. But we know that they rejected him, even though he pled with them. They rejected him from being their Messiah. And so God has rejected them. That priesthood is gone. We have reverted back to the original priesthood, the priesthood of Melchizedek. And Yeshua comes under that priesthood of Melchizedek, and he serves in the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched and not man.